Yeah, you were on there too. I saw you. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry. It's been kind of a chaotic evening here at my house, as usual, and I broke the microphone thing, so I'm going to hold it like this. I hope you can all hear me fine. Welcome to kosher class number 4. We've been at this for a month now, so I hope that you're all taking steps to begin your life as a kosher consumer and a kosher person. Again, if you ever have any questions, please email me. Do not hesitate. If you're on Facebook, you can add me as a friend. Just make sure that you send me a little personal message that you're from the kosher class so that I know that I can add you. Oh, is it too loud? I hope not. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So we didn't cover the whole glossary last time, but I think it's really important that we go in depth over each of the glossary terms because they're so important and crucial to moving around in the kosher world with confidence and understanding what kosher is all about, especially if you're talking to your rabbi, if God forbid some issues come up. So I am just going to just quickly review what we did last time. We covered kosher kitchen, kosher consumer. So we talked about Bishul Akam and Bishul Yisrael, foods that can be cooked by a non-Jew and foods that require cooking by a Jew. And that means someone who is Shomer Torah and Mitzvahs, which means that they keep the complete Torah, they keep Shabbos, Kashrus, all of that good stuff. What a hechsher is, what kashering is, kosher airline meals, your kosher bakery, butcher shop, your kosher home, keeping kosher in and out, and how we need to keep kosher all the time. We talked about kosher style restaurants and how you can sometimes be fooled by advertisements, or kosher style dining, and you don't want to do that. What a mashgiach is, yain mevushal, the kosher wine that's been cooked, a mikvah, pas Yisrael, or bread that's been baked by a Jew. Okay, I think that's where we sort of left off. Now, separate plates. So people who keep kosher have 2 sets of plates, cookware, and cutlery, one for meat and one for dairy. Now, certainly if you're a vegetarian, but you eat dairy, you really only need 1 set of plates. However, I have a friend, she's a strict vegetarian. She does eat dairy sometimes, but she has 1 bowl in her house for meat because she wanted to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of separating meat and milk. So she has a bowl just for her cat, and she feeds her cat meat, like kosher meat, chicken broth, in this bowl. So you can certainly do that, although if you're a vegetarian, you really only need 1, and you're strict and you don't eat meat in your house at all, or any meat-like products, you only need 1 set of dishes. But if you eat meat and dairy at all, you need to have 2 separate everythings. 2 separate ovens, 2 separate stove top range pieces, 2 separate sets of dishes, 2 separate sets of cutlery, cookware, all that good stuff. Now, I said 2 separate ovens. That's right. You got to have 1 for meat and 1 for dairy. You can bypass this certainly if you have a small convection oven that will sit on your countertop. Whatever you cook less of could be for that. So we have a little toaster oven on our countertop that's for dairy, and our main oven is for meat because I have a lot of people over for Shabbos and a lot of people over for Passover and different holidays, so I really need to have a large meat oven. So if you cook more dairy stuff, you should certainly use your big oven for dairy and your smaller oven for meat.
Or you could keep 1 thing covered all the time. Pick 1 covered.
Oven?
Yeah. No?
What are you talking about?
Like if you always cover meat, then
No. So you need to have separate ovens. And the other thing that you should do is you should designate your range burners, meat and dairy. Now, it's preferable to keep the ones that you're not using at the time covered. This is not always possible, but you can go to any Bed Bath & Beyond or even the dollar store and get cheap range covers that will cover your burners. If you have one of those cooktops where it's like inside the glass, first of all, I don't think it's possible to kasher that. And second of all, so when you are ready to kasher your kitchen, become completely kosher, you're going to have to sort of talk to your rabbi about that. But if you have gas or electric coils, you can cover those burners that you're not using with a little cover. Same thing with your sinks. You need to have two separate sinks. Now, if you have a divided sink, this makes life really easy. One side can be meat, the other side can be dairy. Again, it's preferable to cover the one side that you're not using. You can do this with a large cutting board or some other plastic, piece that can go over either the meat or the dairy side. But again, it's not always possible, so just be very, very careful that the meat doesn't splash into the dairy side and vice versa. I have two separate sponges, two separate vegetable brushes for meat and dairy dishes. And so we were covering meat and dairy. So I have a meat tablecloth down, I cover it with a piece of plastic, and then I have dairy placemats. So that might be something that you could utilize. Placemats are also very inexpensive. You can either make them, buy them at the dollar store, Bed Bath & Beyond, I keep mentioning Walmart, any of those places you can find good placemats. Okay. Moving on. A toivel. Now, toivel is a Hebrew word that means dip. And we use it in kosher language to refer to when we're dipping our utensils in the mikvah. So you need to dip every glass or metal utensil or pot or dish in a mikvah before you use it for the first time. This includes aluminum, those disposable aluminum pans, if you're going to use them more than once. You need to dip those in a mikvah. Guys. Mommy's giving you the class, okay? Craziness. So,
Maybe the phone.
you
Go another room right now. They can't hear you.
So you need to toivel any glass, metal, or earthenware utensils before you use them for the first time. Again, including aluminum pans that you're going to reuse. Now, there are certain laws about which you toivel with a bracha and which you toivel without a bracha. Just toivel all glass, metal, and earthenware pans and utensils with a bracha for now. Okay, and we can get into the details when we cover brachas later. Okay. Moving right along. Okay, now I'm going on to Israeli food products. Now this is really crucial because I thought, I'm never going to need to know these laws, and then I was working in a kosher restaurant and it came up all the time. So, there, Baruch Hashem, Jews are able to grow produce in Eretz Yisrael. And this is a very unique opportunity for Jews to be able to observe the agricultural mitzvahs that, are required for produce and agricultural products that are produced in Eretz Yisrael. The laws that are related to these foods are very detailed. Be very careful that any Israeli produce that you have purchased is been produced in accordance with the special kosher laws that apply to Israeli agricultural products. You need to make sure that the package has kosher certification and that it has a reliable kosher certification that includes the laws that are unique to Eretz Yisrael. Okay? So there's a hechsher from the Eidah Charedes, the Badatz, that is totally reliable. You can always count on them. Joe, can you get me a Badatz hechsher so I can show them? Or you could go on Wikipedia and look up the Eidah Charedes. I'll type it in for you to look at the hechsher. Hold on one second. Okay, so my husband's going to put the link too, so that you can look at it. See, it just takes too long. This is why I don't want to do this. This.
On Wikipedia. Or I guess maybe hechshers. I don't know.
Okay, so I found it.
Oh, there's Wikipedia.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, so there is the link to, why isn't it showing my, okay, so there's the link so that you can look at the Badat hechsher. Now this is a hechsher that you can absolutely rely on for any Israeli food products. They make sure that people keep all of the laws that we're about to cover for produce that comes from the land of Eretz Yisrael. So let's cover those laws right now. Also, fresh produce probably doesn't have a hechsher on it. If it says it's from Israel, you need to call your rabbi. I had an experience with this when I was working in the kosher restaurant where we had received some bell peppers in a package that said that they were produced in Mexico and Israel. Now, when that happens, you need to call your rabbi. The laws are much more detailed than I can go into right here, but if you get a piece of produce that has a sticker that says it's from Israel, or if it says it's from Israel when you go and pick it up in the store, do not eat it. You can bring it home, certainly no problem, but call your rabbi before you prepare it and serve it. My husband's saying it's really better not to buy it, and I tend to agree, but if you do buy it, you should call your rabbi before you do anything with it, before you prepare it, before you cut into it, before you wash it, before you do anything, okay? My husband just said the Art Scroll Sitter says what to do. But again, I really encourage you to call your local Orthodox rabbi because he'll be your touchstone for everything kosher. Okay, so first of all, challah. So now challah is not just unique to Eretz Yisrael. Challah is something that you can even do in your own home. If you are making food that is, like say you're making bread or cake and you're using more than 5 pounds of flour, I think it's 15 cups of flour, you need to take challah and make a bracha. Now this is a very, very cool mitzvah. This is the only mitzvah that was performed in the temple that we can perform now without the temple, and we do it in our own homes. This is an incredible opportunity, and I highly encourage anybody who bakes challah to go ahead and do the full 5 pounds of flour, even though it's like crazy and you have to get a special mix or whatever. But really, really do it because it's a very, very unique opportunity to do a mitzvah that's from the Beis Hamikdash, from the temple, that you can perform in your own home. So when one needs a significant amount of dough, and here it says over 2.5 pounds for baking purposes, a small portion of the dough is removed for the Kohen. Well, today we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, so we don't give it to the Kohen. Instead, we burn it. So what you can do is you take out that little piece of challah. You just take a little handful, you wrap it up in a piece of tin foil and throw it into your oven and let it burn. Now, it's better to let it burn without anything going on in the oven. So if you're cooking other stuff, it's better not to do that. And again, we'll have a more detailed discussion of challah later when I cover baking bread, but that's Just so you know, it's a really unique mitzvah. It's something that's really important. It's great that you can do it, a Beis HaMikdash mitzvah outside and in your own home. So I highly encourage you to take advantage of it. And we will cover challah in a later class in more detail. Okay, so Mahadran. Mahadran is a Hebrew word meaning beautiful. Mahadran is the Israeli version of the colloquial term glatt kosher, which we covered a couple of classes ago. Now, glatt kosher is a term that refers to meat, but you will see in Israel or in Israeli produce they'll say Mahadran, which means like extra kosher, super kosher, I guess. Just that they've really closely observed the kosher laws. Okay. Orla. Like, Pas Yisrael, glatt kosher when it comes to meat, Chalav Yisrael when it comes to dairy, and so on. Okay. Orla. Orla is the term for fruit that grows during the first 3 years of a tree's growth. The fruit from fruit trees as well as grapes cannot be eaten for 3 years after the trees are planted. This law also applies to trees outside of Israel. If you plant a fruit tree in your backyard, so you plant an apple tree with your kids, it's important to consult with your rabbi regarding how to render the fruit permissible to eat in the 4th year. Okay, so it's a very complicated mitzvah, but if you decide to plant a tree with your kids, it's a fruit-bearing tree, go ahead and talk to your rabbi and he will help you figure out what to do with that fruit after the 4th year. So there's also Orla laws that apply to fruit that comes from trees in Eretz Yisrael. It's a mitzvah that's universal. So any fruit tree you can't eat the fruit for the first 3 years. Okay? Shvis. Shvis is a Hebrew word for the 7th year, and it relates to the next law, which is Shemitah. Okay, a most extraordinary agricultural law in Israel is Shemitah, the 7th or sabbatical year. The Torah says that every 7 years, agricultural work must stop, and only the foods one can eat are those that grow on their own. Okay? So, with the return of a Jewish agricultural industry to Israel, the laws related to Shemitah are once again extremely relevant. They are very, very complicated and detailed laws. We just passed the Shemitah year, I think 2 years ago. So, and again, when I was working in the kosher restaurant, we ran into Shemitah issues, and I had to call the local rabbi, who was the head of the kosher organization here, and have him do some research for me on whether or not we could eat these bell peppers, because we had just come out of a Shemitah year. So Shemitah, basically, you just leave your crops and just let them do their own thing. Sort of a rest period or a Shabbos for the agriculture, and they're not allowed to be brought out of Israel, and the only food that you can eat from this crop is ones that grow on their own. Okay, so just know, Shemitah every 7 years. We just passed one 2 years ago, so we have another 5 years before it will become really relevant. What? Cannot be bought or sold, cannot be brought out of Israel. It's very crucial to Israeli produce. Okay. Tevel is the Hebrew term for untithed produce. Now we're going to talk about tithing produce. Okay, Truma and Meiser. This is really important. Truma and Meiser are terms for various gifts or tithes that apply to Israeli grown produce. In Israel, one has an obligation to donate certain percentages of one's produce to the Kohen and Leviim. So the priests and the Levites in the temple would get these tithes, and this is how they would support their family when the temple was existing. However, in the land of Eretz Yisrael, no matter what, they have to tithe the produce, even without the temple, okay? So the laws, the implication today, even without the Beis HaMikdash, is that untithed foods cannot be eaten. So again, when I was explaining that I had gotten these bell peppers that said they were from Israel, I had to call the rabbi and I had to take Truma and Meiser. And it says in the Art Scroll Sitter how to do this. If you're confused or concerned, please call your local Orthodox rabbi. It's a pretty complicated process. Okay, moving on. Common kosher terms. So there's a lot that we've already covered. Chadash. Now, we're going to get into learning about Yashin in a little bit, and Chodesh is basically the opposite of Yashin. So we'll learn about that in a second. Okay, cud. Cud is basically food. This is kind of a gross topic, but it's important for the kosher consumer. Cud is food that's brought up from the first stomach of a cow or any ruminant animal into the mouth where it's chewed again and then redigested. Okay, so one of the qualifications for an animal being kosher that it has to chew its cud. So that's what it is, basically. The food goes down to the stomach, it comes back up, and they chew it again, and then they redigest it. Okay. Oh, the other qualification for an animal being kosher is that it has to have split hooves. Split hooves and chew its own cud. Okay? Okay, on to this. Fins and scales. Fins are the parts of a fish that help it move and steer through the water. Scales are thin protective plates that cover the skin of the fish. So the Torah says that for a fish to be kosher, it must have fins and scales. Scales are only defined as scales that can be removed. So, for example, eels have what looks like scales on their body, but they're not removable without tearing the flesh. So those are not considered to be kosher because you can't just scrape them off. But like if you ever go fishing and you catch a trout, you're able to easily scrape those scales off. That is a kosher fish if it has fins and scales. There has never been a fish found that has scales but no fins. So it's another remarkable aspect of the Torah that, 3,000 years ago, before we had all these discoveries of animals, in the Amazon and stuff, that there were no fish ever found to have scales but no fin. And it's another point that shows that the Torah is true, that it requires us to have fins and scales both. Okay, cool. Moving right along. Kashrus is the Yiddish version of the word kashrut, which is the Hebrew term. Okay, so if you hear me say kashrus, that's what I mean. I mean kashrut, I mean kosher, I mean kashrus. Okay. Kashrut is the Hebrew word that translates as the whole bunch of stuff that relates to kosher. I think the baby's choking. Okay. La la la, there's a whole bunch of see this, see that, stuff we've already covered. Okay, shellfish. Shellfish are mollusk and crustaceans, like lobster, crabs, and clam. Now, these are not kosher, but they're no less kosher than squid, shark, whale, seal, dolphin, porpoise, seahorse, starfish, things like that. But people tend to hold shellfish up as the quintessential non-kosher fish. However, any fish that does not have scales that are removable and fins is not kosher. So that whole laundry list I just gave you, those guys are not kosher, as well as shellfish. Okay, a shochet. A shochet is a kosher slaughterer. Now, he is someone who's very knowledgeable in Talmudic studies, scrupulous in his personal religious life. That means he keeps all of the mitzvahs of the Torah to his best ability, and he's expert in the laws of kosher slaughter. It's somebody who has a lot of integrity, is very well respected in the community generally, and a lot of people might rely on a single shochet for their kosher food. So this guy has a lot of responsibility. So if you ever hear somebody refer to a shochet or say, I'm a shochet, it's basically a rabbi who is very skilled in these laws and is a very, what we call a Talmid Chacham, someone who's learned a lot, who studied a lot of Torah and knows a lot of the laws in detail, and is also very, very scrupulous in his own personal religious observance. Okay. Split hooves. This is one of the other requirements besides chewing the cud for an animal to be kosher. So, hooves, it has to have split hooves and chew its cud. So like pigs, they have a foot that looks like a hoof that's split, but it doesn't chew its own cud, so therefore it's not a kosher animal. And so on and so forth. Okay. Vad and vadakashus. Okay, the Hebrew word vad means gathering. Basically, here it means a gathering of people who are responsible for proper application of kosher standards. So here in Virginia, where I live, we have the Vad of Virginia, which is basically well, right now it's one rabbi who just makes sure that, and all the mashgichim, all of the kosher observers who make sure that the food that bears that standard is kosher. Okay? Most Jewish communities have their own local vad, or it might be called vad hakashrus. Okay, moving right along. Yashan. Okay, yashan is a Hebrew word meaning old, and it refers to wheat in this context. Wheat that's always permissible to eat. Yashan, wheat, is always okay to eat. And the contrast to that is chadash, which I mentioned earlier, which is temporarily impermissible. Basically, you have to think of Passover for a few minutes as being like New Year for wheat. Okay? So you can't eat any wheat. There's a law that basically says you can't eat any wheat until after Passover. So thou shalt not eat any harvested wheat until after New Year for the wheat. This means that if you planted the wheat in August and harvested it in January, you would have to wait to eat it until after Passover. Makes sense? From January until Passover, that wheat would be called chadash, and it's not permissible. But from Passover and thereafter, it is called yashan, and it is permissible. Okay. So, basically, here we go. Sorry, I'm having technical issues tonight. Whoa. Okay. Oh, it's Noah? Okay, you better talk to her. Scholars have a difference of opinion on whether or not these laws apply inside Eretz Yisrael or outside Eretz Yisrael. So it's a good idea to follow the custom of your rabbi that you've chosen to follow. Whether it's your local Orthodox rabbi or your Rebbe, you should talk to them and see whether or not they keep yashan. Okay? And I will leave that up to you. Okay, in Eretz Yisrael, everybody has to keep it. Most of the Sephardim outside Eretz Yisrael say you do have to keep it, and most of the Hasidim outside Eretz Yisrael say you don't have to keep it. And then in regular Ashkenazi Judaism, there's different customs. So again, I would just really encourage you to call your local Orthodox rabbi or the rabbi that you are learning with and speak to him about his customs with Yashan Chadash, and go ahead and adopt that into your own life. Okay. The next chapter, or your parents, if your parents are kosher keeping people, you can always ask your parents. So chapter 3 is basically, he breaks down how to become kosher in a few different steps, and also the sort of emotional and social stuff that goes along with keeping kosher, like how are you going to talk to your friends about keeping kosher? Are you ever going to be able to go out for sushi with them again? How do you talk to your parents when they invite you over for Thanksgiving dinner about the fact that you keep kosher now? So it's worth the browse. It's really worth a read. But I think it's a little soon for us to get into it. So what I wanted to talk about tonight was, first of all, I wanted to talk about the concept, the Kabbalistic concepts behind keeping kosher. And also I wanted to talk about, maybe cover a recipe that I actually made for dinner for my own family tonight. So in Kabbalah, there's a concept that everything has a holy spark within it that needs to be released through a mitzvah. Okay, so by eating kosher, one of the things that we're accomplishing through eating kosher, besides increasing our spiritual sensitivity, besides connecting ourselves to a Jewish lineage that stretches back to the time of Moses, besides this and that and the other thing, you should know that there are holy sparks within the food that need to be released, or a tikkun to be made upon them, by you making a bracha and choosing the most kosher food. Now, not only does this affect you spiritually, but it affects the entire universe spiritually, according to Kabbalah, because you're releasing that holy spark so that it can connect to the other holy sparks in the universe, and and I can't describe how to say make a tikkun, but make a tikkun, like rectify things that haven't been, how do I say, not wrong things, but things that are difficult. You can make it easier just by eating kosher food. And it's so simple. You get a piece of kosher food, you make a bracha on it. If it's something that needs to be cooked, you prepare it in a kosher way. You make a bracha on it and you eat it. How much simpler could it be? And who doesn't like to eat? I love to eat, obviously. So it's such an easy thing to do, and you're really having sort of eternal implications with this. Now, the higher quality of kosher that you can keeping Chalav Yisrael and keeping Pas Yisrael. And for those of you who are just starting out with kosher or starting to experiment with kosher, I don't recommend that you jump right into Chalav Yisrael or Pas Yisrael. That might be something that you want to work towards, but those higher level of kosher have less what they call klipas, or less divisions between the real physical food and its holiness. So it's so much easier to absorb that holiness into yourself if you're eating a higher level of kosher, if you're watching that you're eating the best textures. But for those of us that are just starting out, I would just say, make sure that you're buying food with a hechsher, okay? If you're not ready to do this stage yet, that's totally fine. But when you are, make sure that you're getting a good hechsher and that you know what you're getting into. Make sure that you're comfortable with the food that you're eating. And if you are faced with a choice at the store between Chalav Yisrael and regular milk, choose the Chalav Yisrael milk. It's only a few pennies more expensive. It's really not that much more expensive, and it makes such a spiritual difference. The closeness there's a closeness between the food's holiness and your holiness. You don't have to break through so many boundaries to get to. And I'm speaking about this in a Kabbalistic sense. So if I haven't confused you too much, I'll move on to a recipe. Okay. This is a really easy recipe that you can make for a dinner party, and everyone's going to think that you went to a lot of trouble. But I'm going to tell you how to make it parv, okay? You're going to start with a 1/4 cup of olive oil, and you're going to put that into a parv saute pan. Now make sure it's kind of big, okay? You're going to chop up 1 onion with your parv knife. Chop it up with your parv knife and on your parv cutting board. Now, it's interesting, I'm going to make a segue during this recipe to tell you that onions, lemons, limes, and a few other foods that are considered to have a sharp taste carry with them the status of what they were. Say if you chop an onion with a knife and you chop it with a meat knife, those are considered to be meat onions, and they cannot be eaten with dairy or cooked on dairy equipment, okay? Whereas something else, like if you accidentally cut, tomatoes are probably not a good example. If you accidentally cut into a potato with a dairy knife and then you needed to cook it in a meat pot, it's not the end of the world. But with the onion it is. It carries with the status of whatever you cut it with. So since we're making this recipe parv, make sure you have a parv cutting board and a parv knife to chop up your onion. Now, in that 1/4 cup of olive oil in your large saute pan, you're going to saute that onion until it's translucent but not browned. You can add a little bit of garlic, like maybe a teaspoon of minced garlic into that if you like garlic. Then you're going to saute that for a little bit. Then you're going to add 4 ounces of smoked salmon that you've chopped. Add the smoked salmon, and you're going to cook that on medium-high heat for 2 to 3 minutes until the salmon turns opaque. You'll see when it starts out, it's sort of like transparent, translucent, and then it's going to turn into like almost a milky pink color when it's ready. Okay, so you're just going to cook that salmon in with the onions until it turns a milky pink color. Then you're going to add 3 tablespoons of capers, which capers, a lot of people think capers are fish, but they're not. They're actually little flower buds that are pickled, and they add a lot of flavor to a lot of foods. So you're going to add 3 tablespoons of capers. Then you're going to put 8 ounces of heavy cream. Now, we're making this parve, so we got to find parve cream. Well, I'm here to inform you that a lot of coffee creamers that you buy, especially the frozen ones, are parve. If you look on them and they have a OU with no D, just a plain OU, that means it's parve. Or if it has a Chaf K with no D or dairy next to it, that means it's parve. So just make sure that since we're making this recipe parve, that it really, really has no D or dairy, connection next to the hechsher. So you're going to add 1 cup of that parve creamer in, and you're going to heat it up. Steven's hungry. I know, it's a really good recipe. So you're going to heat it, just heat it through. You're going to add some pepper, whatever, as much as you like to taste. I add a little dill. And then you want to taste it before you add the salt, because the salmon and the capers are both salty, so you don't want to add too much salt. So add a little salt, add a little pepper. And then to that, you're going to pour in 1 pound of freshly cooked pasta. Like, I use bow ties, or you could use shells. Any small shape. Macaroni works fine too. You're going to toss that in with the sauce. Now, if it doesn't look like there's enough sauce, you can always add like a tablespoon or 2 of the pasta cooking liquid and mix that up. And it is a very, very delicious dish that you can easily make parve. And if you've made it totally parve, cutting it with a parve knife on a parve cutting board, cooking it in a parve pan, then you can enjoy it with maybe some Parmesan cheese, or if you need to eat it next to a meat meal, you could do that as well. Okay, I hope this has been a really insightful class. You guys have about 15 minutes before... Oh yeah, don't forget, don't eat fish and meat together. If you guys are learning Shulchan Aruch with my husband, that is in the Shulchan Aruch. It says it's very dangerous to eat fish and meat together. So you could eat this delicious fish pasta dish that we just made before you have your meat meal, like on Shabbos, for example. That could be your fish course. It's also good for breakfast, shockingly. And it actually even is better cold, in my opinion, the next day. But that's just me. So I hope you guys had a great class, and I will post this recipe. If you need details on the recipe, please email me. I'll type that in now. I'll be happy to share with you the details of that recipe. And if you have any questions, of course, please email me. I am going to open it up for questions now. I'm going to let you guys have about 10 minutes to ask questions. I'll wait 2 or 3 minutes, and then if there's no questions, I'll just close up. At 9 o'clock, my friend Roger is going to have a class on Nochide laws, and he's very, very knowledgeable, and he's an amazing person. He's actually going to be giving a class from the Holy Land of Israel, so that should be very exciting. So I'm going to open it up for questions right now. So if you have any questions, please type it in, and I will be happy to address it. Okay, I'm waiting another 2 minutes for questions, and then if there are no questions, I'll go ahead and close up. So 2 more minutes. Yeah, there is a lot to think about and a lot to practice doing. Feel free to go back and watch the old classes if there's anything that you have questions about or you're not sure on for clarification. And again, always you can email me if you have questions. I'm happy to answer. If we're friends on Facebook, Facebook me, whatever you need to do to get into it. Hold on, let me ask my husband where he got my copy of the book. Joe, where'd you get a copy of this book used? Amazon. My husband got the book used on Amazon.com. Just type that in. I actually met the rabbi who wrote this book. He was at a outreach conference that my husband and I went to when we were first married, and he's a really incredible person, and he has written a lot of really good outreach books and books for beginners that are very, very informative. It's probably the best book on kosher, for beginners that I've ever read. It's very detailed, and it goes into a lot of the philosophy and the spiritual stuff behind kosher, not just like this is how to keep kosher, which I really appreciate. Um, okay, does anybody else have any questions? I'll give you one more minute. Okay, you guys. So I'll give you about 10 minutes to take a break, get a snack, a kosher snack, whatever you need to do. And then, oh, Sharon's got a question. How can one verify if fruit bought in the store is from a 4-year-old tree? That's a great question. You can't verify it. The only way that you can be safe is not to eat Israeli fruit produce outside of Israel. And I hate saying that because, obviously we want to support our Jewish brothers and sisters in Israel, but the laws are so complicated on agriculture from Israel that if we're not in Israel, it's very, very difficult to keep it. So there's no way to verify that your fruit is from a tree that's, that's 4 years old or older. And it is unfortunate that a lot of people and a lot of farmers in the land of Israel are not aware of these laws. And there's a whole group of rabbis who goes around and educates farmers and agricultural workers about the different laws that are important in the production and manufacturing of agricultural in Israel. So it's getting better, but I would just say don't worry about it and just eat produce that's not from Israel. The rule, Sharon, for fruit being from a 3-year-old tree is for everybody. It's outside of Israel and in Israel, but the only way that you can really guarantee it for yourself is if you plant your own fruit tree, not to eat it for the first 2 years. Really, the stuff that you're getting in the store should be fine. Don't stress out too much about that. If you're getting it in the store, it's not from Israel, go ahead and eat it. It should be fine. But if you're planting your own tree, don't eat the fruit for the first 3 years. That's all I would tell you to do. Hope I answered your question. Is that okay, Sharon? Okay, guys, if that's all the questions we've had for tonight, I will turn you loose. Roger Grattan is going to give a class at 9 o'clock on Noahide laws. I hope you really enjoy it, and I hope you have a great, happy, successful, and kosher week. Thank you. Take care. Bye.